Hi, this is James and I'd like to welcome you to part 6 of my 6-part video series. So this is it. In this video we'll be covering the last 6 cards of the Lenormand deck. So we're going to be looking at cards 31 to 36, so that's going to be Sun to Cross. And if you stuck with me all the way through up to this point, I want to thank you for your continued support and encouragement. I appreciate all the views, I appreciate all the likes, I appreciate all the comments. I really did enjoy dialoguing with each and every one of you. I appreciate the support and encouragement. It means the world to me. If you just happen to be joining me now for this part of our series, I'll give you a little bit of a recap. The reason why the series even was created was because a couple of viewers of mine, Miss L and Carla, I always like to give them a shout out by name. They each asked me if I would be willing to do a video, or in my case, videos, because I tend to be very wordy, if I would make some videos sharing the keywords that I use when I work with Lenormand. So that was the inspiration for the video. And now that I've talked about why I did the video, let's talk about the deck that's been walking with us throughout this series. And once again, I'm working with La Faneuse, Lilac Dondorf, and just as I have in previous installments, I will be leaving a link in the description box below that will give you ways to get more information about the deck. And if you're like me and you're building your collection, you could think about whether or not you'd like to add this particular deck to your collection. And so now that I've introduced the deck, let's get to the table and take a look at the cards, starting with card 31, which is Sun. And here we are with card 31 in the deck, which is Sun. And my immediate go-to keywords for Sun are success, confidence, and positive energy. When it comes to Sun, I also think of clarification, illumination, enlightenment. Whereas Coffin, where I talked about earlier, can represent being unconscious or unconsciousness. Sun is the opposite. For me, it represents consciousness or being conscious. It can represent warmth because the sun literally keeps us warm. And since I said literally, keeping with the literal aspect of Lenormand, this can also actually represent the sun itself. And going along those lines, Sun can also represent day, something daily, or daylight. And Sun is a card of happiness. And going along with the happiness aspect of this card, whereas we talked about with Clover being little luck, this is the card that can represent big luck. So those are my keywords for Sun. And now let's move on to the next card in the line, which is Moon. And now here we are with Moon, card 32 in the deck. And my immediate go-to keywords for Moon are career, recognition, and reputation. Moon for me can be a card of honor. And going along with the career aspect of Moon, this card can also represent one's vocation. Whereas with Heart, we talked about emotions and feelings. Moon for me can represent emotional satisfaction. And keeping with the recognition and the honor aspect of Moon, I sometimes see this card as celebrity. So it can represent an actual celebrity or somebody who has celebrity-like status. And whereas Sun, the previous card, can represent daytime, the Moon can represent night. Going along with that, it can also actually represent the Moon itself. And with that, it can represent moon cycles or phases. So you can think of things like the new moon, the full moon. And the inset of this card is the Eight of Hearts. So for me, the Eight of Hearts can represent a full lunar cycle. So sometimes along with that, I sometimes look at moon as a full lunar cycle as well, and the time frame for that could be a month in time. So those are my keyword associations with moon. And I want to say at this point, before I close this segment out, is that when you're working with Lenormand, you want to keep in mind that cards like moon, this card, sun, which came before it, and tower, which was in an earlier video, if you come to Lenormand from tarot, you have to keep in mind that these cards don't mean the same things as their counterparts in tarot, right? So you have to keep that in mind when you're working with these cards. Oh, and stars too, because there's also a tarot card, the star, in the deck as well. So when it comes to those four cards, you want to be mindful of not reading them as you would their tarot counterparts. And so now let's move on to the next card in the line, another one of my favorite cards in the deck, and that is Key. And here we are with card 33, which is Key, another one of my favorite cards in the deck. And so for me, when I see Key, I immediately think of things like an answer, a solution, some kind of revelation, or a discovery. For me, Key represents something important, something vital, something certain. This is my card of truth. So if I want to see in a grand tableau, let's say, what the truth of the situation is, I look for the Key card and see what cards are surrounding that. So this, again, it can represent truth. Now going with the literal aspect of Lenormand, Key can represent an actual key. And going along with that, the function of a key is that it unlocks things and locks things. So for me, Key can also represent unlocking and locking. And going with that, if you think about it, Key can represent anything that is used to gain access. And going with that, it could be a key code, a password, things like that. Anything that allows you some type of access. And then the last thing I want to say about Key for me is that this is my yes card. So whenever I see it in a line of 5 or a reading with 3 cards, something of nature, whenever it shows up and I'm asking a yes or no question and Key comes up, it represents yes. So those are my thoughts on Key. And now we'll move on to the next card in the line, which is Fish. And here we are with card 34, which is Fish. So when Fish comes up for me, I automatically think of money and finances. And along those lines, wealth and abundance. For me, Fish is a card of depth. So it can represent something deep or going deeper. Keeping with the literal aspect of the card, this card for me can represent water. And then playing off on that, Fish can represent liquids, it could represent fluids, it could represent drinks, and that would include alcohol. And then Fish can represent actual fish. And then some other meanings I have for this card are flow. If you think of cash flow, so flow like that. And circulation, if you think of the idea about circulating money, and that money is something that's always in circulation. You know, either giving or receiving money, you know, spending money, investing money. Money's always in some type of circulation or some form of circulation. So for me, this can represent circulation. And then the last thing I want to say about Fish is that it is a face card. And here we have the King of Diamonds. So another one of my meanings for Fish based on the King of Diamonds is an entrepreneur. And so those are my thoughts on Fish. And so now we'll move on to the next card, which is Anchor. And here we are with card 35, which is anchor. For me, when anchor comes up, I think of work. This is one of my work cards. So for me, it represents work, but not just any type of work. This represents routine work. It can represent hard work. I tend to think of this as physical or manual labor. This can represent one's livelihood. So this could be like long-term work. Whatever the work is, that whoever's doing it has been doing it for a long time. And the reasoning behind that is some of the other keywords that I have for anchor. The reason for the work is because it provides some form of stability and security. So stability and security are some other of my keywords. When it comes to anchor, I think of something fixed or some type of fixture. When anchor comes up, we're being encouraged to persevere and to be persistent. Anchor can describe someone as being hardworking and serious. Anchor can describe something as being heavy. Now, another one of my meanings for this card is hope. And that comes from the idea that Lenormand was known as the game of hope. And so those are my keyword associations for anchor. And now we'll move on to the next and final card in the deck, and that's cross. And here we are with card 36, the final card in the deck, and that is cross. So my immediate thoughts on cross when it comes up, I think of spirituality, I think of religion, and I think of faith. So that's either one's faith or we're being encouraged to keep the faith. Traditionally, this card is known as difficulty or some type of burden. For me, I've had it come up as responsibility. Cross can represent some form of persecution. And with that, the challenging aspects of cross can indicate a crisis, an ordeal, or some type of test. I've had cross come up to show a situation that has been deemed as critical or necessary. So those are a couple of my other words for cross. From an emotional standpoint, cross can represent grief and suffering. And keeping with the literal aspect of cross, it can represent an actual cross or some other type of religious symbol. In the more spiritual aspects of cross, it can represent fate or karma, if you happen to subscribe to either one of those. And then here's one that is uniquely my own. And this came about as a result of exploring, working with Lenormand, doing a Celtic Cross spread, which is commonly used with tarot. And so I tried it out just to see how it would read and different combinations and permutations I could come up with within the Celtic Cross using Lenormand. And the cross card came up. And so it was very interesting that it would come up as I was doing a Celtic Cross Tarot layout. So for me, that is one of my personal associations with this. Let's say you get book in the same line. You could be doing a reading, which would be book, using cards, again, which would be book, and then cross could represent doing a Celtic Cross Tarot layout. So a Celtic Cross Tarot layout is one of my personal associations for cross. And on that note, we will bring this video series to a close. This is it. If you've joined me up to this point, yay, we got through the deck. And so my intention was, when I started this series, that I was going to be hopefully giving you some different ways of looking at some of the cards. So if you followed me all the way through, I hope you found a few keywords that you could add to your own dictionary. So as I close, I want to thank you for joining me for this video series and for sticking all the way through it. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I look forward to the next video series, and there's already one in mind, so I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping that you will join me for that video series. So more about that as it unfolds. But until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and take care.